The night Emily was locked inside the palace kitchen, she believed she was losing the only dream she had ever dared to keep alive. What she didn't know was that before midnight, the king would reveal a secret buried for 15 years. And the entire palace would discover why a simple maid had always mattered far more than anyone realized. Windsor Palace glittered beneath thousands of crystal lights as noble guests arrived for the Winter Ball, the most prestigious event of the year. Carriages rolled through the gates, musicians filled the grand ballroom with music, and servants rushed through the corridors, making sure every detail was perfect. For most people, it was a night of celebration. For Emily, it was supposed to be a night of belonging. At 24 years old, she had spent nearly 8 years serving the palace. Orphaned as a teenager, she arrived with nothing but a small suitcase and a photograph of her parents. Since then, her life had been spent polishing silver, carrying trays, cleaning corridors, and quietly disappearing into the background once her work was done. Most people barely noticed her, yet Emily never allowed herself to become bitter. She helped elderly servants with difficult tasks. She shared food with young kitchen boys. She spent her free afternoons caring for neglected flowers in forgotten corners of the palace gardens. She treated everyone with kindness, whether they wore a crown or carried a broom. What she never knew was that someone had been paying attention. 5 years earlier, King Alexander had seen Emily remove her own coat during a snowstorm and place it around the shoulders of an elderly gardener. She thought nobody was watching. She expected no reward. The king never forgot that moment. From then on, he quietly noticed her whenever their paths crossed. In a palace filled with people desperate for recognition, Emily was one of the few who never seemed interested in receiving it. As the Winter Ball approached, she allowed herself a dream she had never entertained before. For nearly 2 years, she saved small portions of her wages until she could finally purchase a simple blue dress from a village dressmaker. It wasn't expensive. It wasn't fashionable. But when she looked in the mirror, she felt beautiful, not because of the dress itself, because for the first time in years, she saw something other than a servant staring back at her. She saw a young woman Emily never planned to dance. She never expected a prince to notice her. She simply wanted to stand quietly at the edge of the ballroom and witness the magic she spent every day helping create for others. Unfortunately, Lady Victoria discovered the dress. As chief housekeeper, Victoria believed deeply in social hierarchy. To her, servants belonged below stairs and nowhere else. A maid at the Winter Ball? She said with a cool laugh. Have you forgotten who you are? Emily quietly explained that she only wanted to watch. Victoria didn't care. 1 hour before the first guests arrived, she ordered 2 servants to lock Emily inside a storage room behind the kitchens. The door slammed shut. The key turned, and just like that, Emily's dream disappeared. At first she knocked, then she pleaded. Eventually she sat alone on the cold stone floor, holding the blue dress against her chest while distant music echoed through the walls. That was the hardest part, not the darkness, not the humiliation, but knowing that life was happening only a few corridors away while she remained trapped behind a locked door. As tears filled her eyes, memories of her childhood returned. She remembered winter evenings beside a small fireplace, listening to her mother's stories about kindness and compassion. Her mother often said, "People may overlook your kindness, Emily, but kindness always leaves a mark somewhere." Tonight, for the first time, Emily wondered if her mother had been wrong. Meanwhile, the Winter Ball was underway. The ballroom sparkled beneath crystal chandeliers. Couples danced across polished marble floors, while nobles exchanged laughter and conversation. Yet, King Alexander found himself distracted. Something felt wrong. Then he noticed the flowers. Emily always arranged the flowers before every important royal event. Tonight, something about them felt unfinished. He glanced around the ballroom. No sign of her. Strange. The king asked several servants where Emily was. No one answered. Finally, a frightened kitchen boy stepped forward. "Your Majesty." Miss Emily was locked in the storage room. The king's expression changed instantly. Without another word, he left the ballroom, Guests exchanged confused looks as he disappeared into the corridor. Minutes later, he stood before the locked door. He unlocked it himself. Inside, Emily looked up in disbelief. For a moment, neither spoke. Then, the king quietly asked, "How long have you been here?" "I don't know, your majesty." The king looked around the room. Then he extended his hand. "Come with me." Emily stared at him. "Your majesty?" "Come with me." A few minutes later, the doors of the grand ballroom opened. The music stopped. Every head turned. King Alexander entered first. Walking beside him was Emily in her simple blue dress. Whispers spread instantly throughout the Chumley room. Lady Victoria felt her face drain of color. The king led Emily to the center of the ballroom. Then he addressed the crowd. "In this room stand many people who inherited privilege, wealth, and titles. Yet one of the finest examples of character I have ever encountered inside this palace possesses none of those things." Silence filled the room. For years, this young woman has shown kindness when nobody was watching. She has treated every person with dignity and asked for nothing in return. Emily could barely breathe. Then the king's voice softened. "And there is something else you deserve too." No. Every eye focused on him. 15 years ago, during a terrible winter storm, my carriage was attacked. Separated from my guards and close to freezing to death, I found shelter in a small cottage. A strange feeling settled inside Emily. The family living there welcomed a stranger into their home. They fed him. They protected him. They saved his life. The ballroom remained silent. The man they saved was me. Gasps swept across the room. The king's eyes met Emily's. "That family was yours." Emily froze. Her heart pounded. "My parents?" The king nodded. "I searched for them years later, hoping to repay what I owed them. But they had already passed away." Tears filled Emily's eyes. "They left behind a daughter." The king's voice trembled slightly. "And when I learned who she was, I promised myself I would never forget the kindness that saved my life." Suddenly everything made sense. The moments she had felt unexpectedly protected. The strange feeling that the king somehow always knew her name. He had been watching over her all along. Not because she was special, because her parents had been. The king turned toward the crowd. Tonight, someone attempted to make Emily feel unworthy of standing in this room. His gaze settled briefly on Lady Victoria. They failed. The ballroom erupted into applause. Many guests stood. Then more. Until nearly everyone in the room was on their feet. For the first time in her life, Emily wasn't invisible. The applause faded. Then the king extended his hand. "Miss Emily, would you honor me with the first dance of the evening?" Tears streamed down her face as she placed her hand in his. The orchestra began playing once more. And beneath the glow of 1,000 lights, a forgotten maid crossed the ballroom floor, beside a king. Not because she had become a princess, not because she had gained wealth or status. But because kindness, after many years, had finally found its way home. If you enjoyed this royal story, please like, subscribe, and join Romance Stories for more unforgettable palace dramas, royal romances, and heartwarming tales. We'll see you in the next story.